Hey guys, it's Mike Murphy. Today I'm going to be doing a reflection on technology trends for American College of Education class 5763. And we're going to be analyzing traditional versus digital age perspectives along the way. So here we go. So first things first, when you're looking at mobile learning in today's education arena, you really have to understand that it is the future of education. Everybody has a smartphone these days, whether it's a 5-year-old kid or a college level learner. But the problem is there's so many apps to choose from that some of them are watered down and some of them just aren't very good. So you need to be able to ferret out the solid ones from the not so good ones. So it can be a slippery slope because if you get too reliant on mobile learning apps, then you're kind of just doomed to rely on those solely, and traditional forms of instruction can kind of fall by the wayside. So you need to find that balance. Now, social networking. From a teacher perspective, it's awesome because it allows you to stay in constant contact with your students and helps to meet them on their turf, so to speak. They're all over the internet with social media and social networking, whether it's Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook, Pinterest. It's all out there for them, and they really appreciate when a teacher makes that effort to meet them where they play and where they hang. And it can only serve to establish stronger connections among and between students and teachers. Okay, so when you're talking about professional learning networks, it's really the kind of putting everything together about a social media presence and mobile learning. It's kind of the when you roll all those components into one. So starting at an early age, it's scary to say, but students need to establish and build an efficient media presence online from an educational standpoint. And that's scary to think about because even 2-3 years ago there wasn't a recognition that online is where the future of learning is going to take place. So there was really no need for students to establish this online presence and monitor it and make sure it's solid and strong. And really for PLNs, it's tricky for teachers to remain on the cutting edge because a lot of, I guess, older teachers, 30 years and older, are kind of stuck in their ways. And it's hard for them to adapt and maneuver and grow from a technological standpoint in this regard. We'll touch a little bit more on it later. But yeah. Okay. Augmented reality and virtual reality and gamification. Oh my. This is it's almost like Pandora's box of educational tools. There's so much potential and boundless possibilities with this that it's almost scary. It's kind of like the iceberg has just been chipped away at, and there's so much under the surface with this. And like I said, the possibilities here are so astronomical that it's almost like I've seen the wave of the future, and I'm equal parts excited and terrified about it. Augmented reality like Erasma and among other apps have really allowed groundbreaking ways for students to interact with content, and it brings it to life almost alarmingly so. So it's going to be very interesting to see where this heads in the future, and I actually hope to be a part of it. Because there's boundless possibilities in that. It's great for skill acquisition, team building, and as I'm actually focusing on in collaboration with the Illinois Institute of Technology, I'm looking to apply gamification to SAT and ACT prep. It's a traditionally stale instructional modality, and I'm really thinking that that is a place where gamification and maybe AR and VR can really help bring struggling learners up to par with their test scores. Okay. Big data analytics. For baseball fans out there, this is the sabermetrics of educational data analysis here. I mean, you really can't slice it any other way. Data and analytics is going to be crucial to student and teacher growth moving forward. Now, in my current building, in my school setting, you see a lot of brushback with veteran teachers and data analytics. It's almost like a bad word, you know. They take it as a personal affront to their teaching styles and talents, and it really doesn't have to be that way. You can use data to just inform, instructional, the instructional process, and you can make changes where you need to do so. And it's not an indictment on anybody's teaching styles. If the students aren't meeting that growth right away, it just helps guide future tweaks to instruction. And no, it's never going to replace the feel of traditional teaching and relationships and things like that, and what's always worked. It again, it's just a way to help guide future instruction. So, like Mastery Manager and other data storehouses are ways for students to, or teachers to, keep track of their students' growth. But there's a lot of professional development required here because it's just seas and oceans and of data that get presented in front of a teacher, and if they don't know how to digest it and do anything with it, well, then it's kind of a wasted opportunity. So students or teachers can really drown in their data if they're not instructed how to use it properly. I've seen many teachers kind of crumble under it, including myself. So that's a really tricky sweet spot for teachers. But a lot of times administration will say, "Oh well, just use data. Use data. We're using data." But they just drop the D word, data, and expect everything to be okay. If you're not using data correctly and efficiently, it all goes for naught. So a way to kind of consolidate this data I've found is through infographics. And for me, I don't want to insult other instructors. I feel like this is data consumption for dummies. I feel like infographics help me really understand and digest that data, and then it puts me in a position to make changes to my instructional modalities that I think can really benefit my students. Okay, a couple questions for consideration here coming down the chute here. So what's your mindset about these technologies? Well, I've always considered myself to be kind of on the cutting edge of implementing technology in the classroom. So I think that it's all good, and I think it's all necessary, from mobile teaching apps to social networking and PLNs and all the way to augmented and virtual realities and gamification. It's all good, but as I mentioned, you got to be careful that you don't drown under all the advances in this educational technology. You need to pick and choose what works for you, bite off a little at a time, and experiment. It's the only way to not be overwhelmed by all these advances. So based on the trends, what do you see and predict? Well, it's going full steam ahead, and basically you better jump on the train or be left behind. And I really worry about some of my cohorts in that I think that I'm on the cutting edge of technology in the classroom, and even I struggle and fall behind and become overwhelmed by it. So we need to find a way to get teachers that are kind of stuck in their ways to branch out and diversify their technology that they use in the classroom. You know, even if they have to be dragged kicking and screaming, quite honestly, you don't want them to be left behind. And in doing so, they'd be really doing their students an injustice. So how are these technologies changing society? Well, it seems like there's a new Snapchat, Instagram, Twitter, Flickr, whatever it is that the kids are rolling out each and every other week. So you got to kind of stay current with their trends, or they tune you out and they think of you as kind of a nerd, I guess you could say. It's you really need to meet them on their turf, like I mentioned earlier. How are they changing these technologies, changing current and future generations? Well, forever and for always. You do worry about students and their screen time, and these kids. It's they do always have their headphones in and their heads down, and so it's like, how do you join the technology revolution, but at the same time limiting screen time and incorporating just that sweet spot amount of traditional instructional pedagogy and value. So how do these technologies fit into your lifestyle and culture? Well, I mean, I am a Twitter addict myself, and I think it's just the one-stop shop for everything information, and it's all at your fingertips, and it's easy to become like addicted to it. So for everything that the whole great advances and things that it provides, social media and these technologies can really be a slippery slope. You go down that rabbit hole, and it's hard to sometimes come back up. So they're changing our cultures and our societies and our kids forever, but it needs to be kind of monitored and done so in a productive way. How do we do that? Well, that's to be seen, but as teachers, we can certainly monitor it and guide our students in that way. Okay. Last but not least, a meeting of the minds. A little food for thought here. So from your perspective, what has created the potential gap among age groups and generations related to technology? I mentioned it a little bit before. I think that screen time is just both the best of times and the worst of times. I think that students can become so adept at using these technologies for better, but at the same time they tend to blur the line between an app that's used for education and an app that's used for pleasure and play. And they say, well, hey, I'm listening to my headphones. What are you telling me to take my earbuds out? And it's like, well, yeah, you're listening to Chance the Rapper, but at the same time, it's time for you to tune into our lecture about, the plots of a short story. So sometimes students really blur those lines, and it can be a challenge to break them of that pattern and recognize that those things need to be compartmentalized. I also think that there's kind of a disconnect in that the current learners are so good at using technology and social media and learning apps that sometimes when you need them to do the basic simple things like send an email with an attachment, they don't have any idea how to do that. So we have to find a way to, I guess, bridge that gap between these new technologies and some of the quote-unquote old archaic technologies, such as, heaven forbid, expecting them to be able to provide an attachment in an email. So we have to go back and do that as well, as crazy as that sounds. So let's see, is it possible to reach a meeting of the minds among those different age groups and generations on the role of technology in society? I certainly believe there is. It is possible. As an educator and a designer, you really have to do a great job of finding a level playing field. You got to establish that in your classrooms. You have to show them that you are on their level and you have the capacity to have the same technological experiences that they have, while also, like I said, establishing that need to be proficient in the quote unquote old styles of learning as well. Okay. Why is it important for educators to understand the mindset of both traditional and digital age learners? I think quite simply you can encapsulate it in this statement. You can't know where you're going until you know where you've come from and where you've been. So you need to know that there were just solid principles that we were raised on in education that can't be replaced, but you also need to bring them into the modern age of technology. So again, you can't know where you're going until you know where you've been. Finally, what strategies do you recommend for bridging the gap between mindsets about technology and its impact? I think it really needs to be a blunt conversation. As an educator, you either need to grow and adapt or simply be left behind. And that's a very, very blunt thing to think about, but it's very true. A lot of teachers are set in their ways, like any profession. But if you aren't willing to adapt, you truly will be left behind, and ultimately your students will suffer from it. So anyways, those are a couple, here's a couple resource references of some things along the way that I've used to kind of guide my thought process. But yeah, that's basically it here. So those are a couple reflections on technology trends and traditional versus digital age perspectives. Hope you enjoyed it. Thanks a lot. Bye.